when we undertake any kind of endeavor, we need faith. But in addition to faith, we also need reason and experience in order to truly have confidence that we can have success in our endeavor. Today, I'd like to share how that with the study of Buddhism, it also requires not only faith, but reason and experience. So, what is faith? Faith can be loosely defined as belief in something that's currently beyond our experience. Something that we haven't experienced yet, we believe that it's possible. And this is a kind of emotional thinking, which requires a bit of imagination. We're thinking about a future outcome. And although we haven't tasted the fruits ourselves, we believe that it's possible. Reason is a kind of understanding of how things work, where we use logic and our intellect, a more rational kind of thinking, to figure out how something works. Experience is direct contact with something through our senses, including thought and thinking, where, based on that contact, we feel something. Experience also includes the absence of contact with something and what that feels like or doesn't feel like. So, most endeavors in life require faith, reason, and experience. And let's take the example of a strength athlete. So, if you're not familiar with the sport, a strength athlete, in one context, is training to be the strongest person out of a whole competition of people and competitors. So the goal is to have maximum strength or to reach one's individual strength potential. And it's important to understand the reasoning behind the process as an athlete, right? They need to know, is it possible to reach the goal? And if it is, how to train to reach that goal. And they need to have faith that they can reach it. So even though they haven't reached their strength potential yet, they have to believe in themselves. Not only believe in the logic and reasoning, but believe that they can reach their maximum potential. This faith comes from a strong belief in oneself, as well as one's coach, as well as the training method. And when one trains, this strength athlete gains experience along the way. So, what kind of experience do they gain? Well, they get stronger through training. Even if they haven't reached their potential yet, they have more faith and more confidence as they get stronger and as they continue to train. And although there may be obstacles along this path of training, this person gains more determination the more experience they have. And along the way, they also learn more theory or learn more of the reasons why they're either succeeding or failing. And as they progress, they then gain more faith and overall confidence in themselves. So, this strength athlete may reach the ultimate goal of maximizing or reaching their potential for strength. When they do that, they would have unshakable faith. And even if they don't reach their goal, even if they don't reach their maximum potential, they still would have faith. Still would have confidence that this training works. And surely they'd be stronger after training than they were before training. And they have gained a lot of knowledge, technique, and experience. So even by not reaching that full potential, there's still benefit. Now let's look at religion in general and how most religions emphasize faith. Faith meaning the existence of something that's greater than ourselves, some kind of God or gods or universal power. And people also believe in the possibility of salvation. And of course, this means something different in each religion. But some meanings of salvation are eternal life, a kind of bliss or joy, power, some form of awakening, or some form of togetherness or unity with the God that they have faith in, or the power that they have faith in. Some religions state outright that all it requires is faith alone, and a person would be saved, so to speak. As long as you believe, there's salvation. And in that religion, it may not be accepted to challenge that statement or try to logically explore or try to prove or disprove or to try to find evidence if salvation is possible just through faith. Some religions just state that you believe and you're saved. If you disbelieve or you doubt, then you're not saved. And some religions also emphasize this aspect of experience, which is where, based on certain practices, a person can realize salvation. Meaning, there may be certain prayers, charitable behavior, wholesome deeds, some form of self restraint or morality, or even self sacrifice. And through those practices and faith, then one can be saved. So, with religion being mostly based on faith, there is a weakness where if a person isn't thinking logically or rationally, and they just go based on faith, that's when it often becomes what we call blind faith. There's no understanding of what's happening. They just believe, and it's an emotional kind of thinking where they may be inspired by a charismatic teacher or even images of some form of God or some image of salvation. And they have this strong feeling that this is right and this is good. But if a person doesn't think critically about their religion and about their faith, that can lead to problems. Because essentially, a person is training themselves to give up clear, logical, rational judgment and to just base their behavior on strong emotional feeling. Just behaving based on strong emotional feeling and interpreting our experience based on imagination and more emotional thinking can be quite dangerous. A person can be swayed by strong feelings to do things that harm themselves, harm others, and even become deluded because they're not logically clear about the cause and the effects of their behavior or of their religious practice. As far as philosophy goes, philosophy we can describe as a set of ideas about reality. And philosophy is based more heavily on reason and intellect, where a person tries to come to an understanding of the human condition, an understanding of the universe through logic and reason. And with philosophy, it's not encouraged to just believe in something, to just have faith in something, but it's encouraged to challenge that philosophy. But philosophers are encouraged to debate with each other, to try to either disprove or prove their positions as correct or incorrect. And one comes to a conclusion through logic, whether that's through thinking in isolation or through discussion and debate. Within different philosophical schools, many of them don't have clear practices or systems of training. They're more just thinking and ideation. Some of them based on a particular philosopher's personal experience, but many of them don't have a system of practice where the following people can then have the same insights or awakenings as the original philosopher. The problem with philosophy that is limited to just reason, of course, this is not all philosophy, and I'm just speaking in more general terms in all of these contexts. If we subscribe to a philosophy that's just based purely on reason, it may make total sense to us. But if there are no practices to help us realize the principles of that philosophy, then we still may find that we lose confidence in it because we don't know how to actually apply it or achieve the insights of those philosophers. And if we don't have a personal contact with people from that system of philosophy, if we're just reading books, just reading words, but we're not part of some sort of philosophical community, we may find that we also lose confidence because we don't have an object of faith. We don't have an example of a person who is living out these principles. We don't see what it's like to live as a person who subscribes to that certain philosophy. So we may again lose confidence fairly quickly and feel like we've lost the motivation to subscribe to it. And then if we look at spirituality as a way to just experience oneself and the universe in a more transcendental way, there are some traditions of spirituality that don't really have a clear system of ideology or a map of the practice. And there may not even be a clear line of thinking in terms of faith, but there's just a practice. For example, meditation. A person wants to be spiritual, so they may just try and meditate and sit a lot and have certain experiences that are out of the ordinary. But if we just have merely experience without any theoretical understanding, without any clear map, and we don't even have anything to base our faith or belief on, then the spiritual practice that's based purely in experience can lead to a lot of problems. And very quickly, unless a person has some transformative experience, they may very quickly lose confidence in it. With the practice of Buddhism, we emphasize faith, reason, and experience all together. So, with regards to faith, one of the first objects of faith that we have is faith in the Buddha. Believing that the Buddha was a real person who lived around 500 BCE, and this person realized the nature of existence. The Buddha realized the nature of his own body, mind, the environment, and the whole universe, and this insight brought a freedom from suffering. And that freedom from suffering allowed him to be skillful in dealing with situations, as well as it allowed him to be compassionate in responding to people and all kinds of living beings. So, this idea of Buddha nature is the natural second object of faith, where Buddha nature refers to that we all have the capacity to realize the same insight that the Buddha realized, so that we can also free ourselves from suffering, all kinds of craving, anger, and confusion, and find true, unconditional peace and joy, and also be able to live skillfully and be compassionate towards all people, all beings. So, Buddhist faith is that we believe that the Buddha was an awakened person, free from suffering, wise and compassionate, and that we ourselves and all people have that same capacity to see the nature of reality and to have this wisdom and compassion. But you don't have to just believe because it's written down in the Buddha's discourses or the teachings of Buddhism. One thing that's unique about Buddhism is that it's encouraged not to just believe, but to understand. So, this is where reason comes in. Reason within Buddhism means that we need to understand the theoretical framework for not only enlightenment or awakening, but unenlightenment, or confusion, which brings about suffering. So understanding comes, of course, through comparisons, relating one thing to the other. So within Buddhism, there's the idea of suffering when we're not at peace. It's in non-enlightenment, again, as I mentioned, due to our ignorance or our lack of awareness. But suffering can end. Why can suffering end? Very briefly, because it depends on conditions. Suffering isn't just this permanent quality of human beings, but suffering is based on the condition of being unaware, not fully and thoroughly aware of the nature of things, of the nature of our human experience. And when that condition of ignorance ceases, when it's resolved, then suffering ceases. The end of suffering is enlightenment. And depending on the different schools of thought within Buddhism, there are many different angles to express this either conditioned arising of suffering or conditioned ending of suffering. In later videos, I hope to share more in detail about this difference of explaining dependent origination. And the path to end suffering is through a process of practice, practicing what's called the Noble Eightfold Path, or in later Buddhist tradition called the six paramitas, the six transcendental practices to get to the other shore, to get from the shore of suffering to the shore of freedom and enlightenment, as if there are two shores and we need to cross over a very broad river. But even if we have a strong theoretical understanding of the process of Buddhist practice from unenlightenment to enlightenment, do we really know deeply what all that means? And the answer is no. Without practice and without experience, it's not complete. Without practice and experience, theory is just knowledge. It can't save us, so to speak. So Buddhism also emphasizes experience. And the Chan tradition, which I was trained in, especially emphasizes experience and not being too attached to theories. So experience comes from applying our faith and reason to a method or system of methods. So as I mentioned, the system of practice within Buddhism can be summarized by the Eightfold Path, or the six paramitas. And these practices include meditation, mindfulness, charity, ethical way of living, and different compassionate kinds of behavior. So these methods bring about a change, a direct change in our experience and view of the world, so that our way of being is different. Our way of seeing changes and our way of being changes based on the experience we gain from practicing. So, for example, some experiences that strengthen our confidence are when we experience calmness and clarity of mind due to meditation, or that when we feel a certain kind of peace when we let go of our self centered way of thinking and responding to things in interpersonal relationships. So, if we're in an argument and we've learned how to relax ourselves, let go of holding so rigidly onto our own opinion, and we can have a more cordial discussion with less emotional fluctuation, less shouting, less arguing. That experience in itself can bring us a lot of confidence in the path. Another example is the joy that comes from selflessly offering ourselves and caring for others, or volunteering and supporting a certain cause. There's a joy that can come from that. Experience also refers to an ongoing experience of life, which is where our our quality of life is just better the more we practice. We find ourselves calmer. We find ourselves more self-aware, more aware of others, and we find that we become more skillful in dealing with challenging situations. We find that we suffer less. We're more at ease in all kinds of situations. This is an ongoing experience which doesn't just stop with one occasion or one point in time, but our overall quality of life and mind steadily improves. That gives us a strong and deeper confidence. And the strongest kind of experience, which makes a person's confidence unshakable, is the experience of awakening itself, where we see clearly the nature of things. We see things as conditioned, as arising and passing based on different conditions, not based on a self, not based on some person inside of us completely in control of life, but we see that our very body and mind and environment is constantly changing and affected by all the conditions within it and around it, which allows us to let go of our fixation to our idea of self or our idea of things that we possess. This experience helps us to release suffering. This experience leads to a complete transformation and change of view of life. It's not just a simple intellectual change where after thinking about all this and we figure it out, we're like, oh, okay, now I understand life. It's not just merely intellectual. It's a complete transformation in the way our mind is working and processing all the information that we get from our senses so that we go from an experience of seeing the world as ourself in opposition to all kinds of other selves and individuals, to seeing the world as a complete integration of constantly changing causes and conditions. And this, what we call ourself, our body and our mind, is just one manifestation out of many different kinds of manifestations. Kind of like we're one wave on the surface of the ocean, filled with countless other waves. All the waves are rising and falling, building and crashing. And although they are different in terms of their size and shape, all the waves are just water. All waves share the same nature of just being water. In the same way, each one of us, although we have different forms and shapes and characteristics, all those forms, all those characteristics are constantly changing based on the interaction with other forms, other characteristics. And so this view, or this experiential view of life, is completely transformative. But it's important to remember that this experience only comes about by having the guidance of reason and by having the momentum or encouragement from faith.